Squatting Slav TV.
Over the course of the last 2 years, both Ben Shapiro and Milo Yiannopoulos have traveled across the US and internationally to speak about the evils of identity politics and especially white nationalism. These events typically attract thousands of young people, and because they're normally hosted in cities that are SJW hellholes, the security and policing fees accompanying these events are oftentimes running in the hundreds and thousands of dollars. When Ben Shapiro spoke in Berkeley in September, the security fees were estimated to be around $600,000, and Milo's recent event in Sydney also came with a $50,000 security price tag. Multiply this by a couple of events each year, and you're looking at a hell of a lot of money being spent on protecting a short guy and a gay guy whose battle to save free speech has been anything but free. All of these high costs aside, what's more troubling is that these two prominent conservative pundit speakers are pushing a hypocritical agenda that their masses of based Trump supporters seem to be completely blind to. As we all know, Ben Shapiro is a proud Jew and has openly called himself a Zionist on several occasions.
I'm loyal to the Zionist vision of Israel, the religious Zionist vision of Israel in particular.
Since there's a lot of misconception about this term, Zionism is essentially a right-wing Jewish religious and ethnic movement for the re-establishment, development, and protection of the nation of Israel. Basically, Zionism is the belief that Judaism is both a religion and an ethnicity, and that based on this, Jews deserve their own ancestral homeland in Israel. Milo, just like Ben, is also a Jew because according to matrilineality in Judaism, those who are born with a Jewish mother, as is Milo, are automatically themselves Jewish by blood. Although Milo insists that he was raised predominantly as a Catholic when speaking to the masses and continually tries to downplay his Jewish ancestry, it's not very hard to realize that his Jewish identity is actually a big part of him, his ideologies, and his values.
My mother is Jewish, so according to Jewish law, I'm Jewish, matrilineally speaking. That's their rule.
With all of this now in the open, you kind of have to ask yourself why it is that both of these guys, who are so openly proud of their Jewish identity, so harshly condemn and demonize identity politics, and especially white identity politics and nationalism. If Ben Shapiro can be a proud Zionist Jew and stand by the idea of an exclusively Jewish homeland, then why is he so bothered if a white American wants the same for his country, or if a Swede or a German want the same for their countries? In fact, when asked about his own ethnic identity, Ben Shapiro made it very clear that he identifies first and foremost as a Jew whose loyalty is to Israel, and then secondly as an American.
What is your identity?
Well, I mean, I'm a Jew who is an American. I don't feel that those values are in conflict, but obviously, you know, my Judaism is key to my value set and key to my identity. So that's you know, in terms of my personal values, I mean, in terms of what I value most, when it comes to, you know, the values that I hold dearest, those are obviously Jewish values.
Therefore, when you go to one of these based Shapiro events, you're actually going to an event where the speaker believes in putting Jewish values first and American values second. Sadly, the cult-like followers of both Ben and Milo don't seem to realize this at all, because both of these guys have done such an excellent job in diverting their audience's attention off of identity politics and instead shifting it onto shared values such as the protection of free speech. Basically, for Ben Shapiro, identity politics are completely acceptable if they work in favor of Jews and the preservation of Jewish identity, but if they're based around whites, nationalism, or white identity, then they're automatically supremacist and Nazi.
Okay, well, if you're going to do identity politics, you will see some white identity politics from the right, which I think is really negative.
On top of this, Ben Shapiro, who has stated on numerous occasions that he condemns violence from the side of SJWs, has been a proud supporter of US intervention in Syria and the toppling of Assad's regime.
There are all these pictures of dead children who have been gassed to death by the Bashar Assad regime. And that comes just a few days after the Trump administration came out and said Assad would remain in power.
As we know, Syria and Israel aren't exactly on the best of terms, yet Ben thinks it's perfectly acceptable to support a war in which young Americans will lose their lives to serve the interests of Israel. Much like Ben, Milo has also been extremely shifty with identity politics from the time that he started gaining popularity. 2 years ago in the pre-election era, Milo bragged about being part of the alt-right, when the movement was painted by the mainstream media as a bunch of white trolls with Pepe memes, but then distanced himself when the media learned that the alt-right was about identity politics. Basically, Milo rode the wave of the alt-right when it brought him media attention and popularity at a time when the movement wasn't clearly defined by the media, and then jumped off of it and began to demonize it as soon as it began to conflict with his own views of identity. Milo has also continually equated nationalism and identity politics with white supremacy, and has always tried to downplay and subvert these movements by making it seem as if anyone questioning Jewish involvement in politics was simply trolling. Sadly, Milo is nothing but an opportunist who uses an artificial conservative cloak to normalize things such as pedophilia, all the while attracting thousands of virgin cucks who think that asking a gay guy for dating advice is fucking based.
Question, so as a young single conservative, I'm asking dating advice from you as I'm finding it hard to find a young conservative girl, and as the most outrageous man on the right, you've managed to find a life partner. Anything.
The fact that an entire generation of young conservatives in America worships a feminized gay man who brags about having a black boyfriend isn't only sad, but also goes to show how conservative values are slowly being degraded and penetrated by sheer degeneracy. Overall, both Ben and Milo have done an excellent job in demonizing identity politics in America, all the while sneakily shoving their identity politics down the throats of young Americans.
The Jews run everything? Well, we do. The Jews run all the banks? Well, we do. The Jews run the media? Well, we do.
While I obviously support the idea of every people on this earth being proud of their identity, I don't support the hypocrisy of people like Ben and Milo who tell others to abandon identity politics, all the while pushing these very same kinds of politics for their own benefit.
White pride, white nationalism, white supremacy isn't the way to go. The way to go is reminding them and yourselves that you should be aspiring to values and to ideas.
So the next time you go to watch either of these guys destroy feminists or wreck SJWs, just remember there's a much bigger agenda going on with both of them than meets the eye.